Okay, out there in Marveland, face front, this is Stan Lee speaking. You've probably never heard a record like this before because no one would be nutty enough to make one with a bunch of offbeat artists, so anything is liable to happen.
Hey, who made you a disc jockey, Lee?
Well, Jolly Jack Kirby, say a few words to the fans, Jackson.
Okay, a few words.
You're listening to the Marvel Saga, Episode 5. I'm Nicholas Prom.
And I'm Jerry McMullen. Face front, true believers, we are back with a brand new episode. It's been just a little bit, but we are eager to get into this book here. What information do you have there, Nicholas, about when this came out?
Let's see. Pardon me.
That's all right.
Excuse me. The Marvel Saga number 5 was cover dated April of 1986. But according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, it went on sale January 7th of 1986.
Okay.
And we've got cover art on this issue, penciled by Paul Ryan, not the House Speaker, and inked by Brett Breeding. Now, Paul Ryan went on to be the ongoing artist for the Fantastic Four in the 90s. He had a lengthy run on that, and he unfortunately passed away last year.
Yep. He also did about half the issues of the Squadron Supreme miniseries of Mark Gruenwald in the mid '80s.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yes. And of course, the inker Brett Breeding had a bit of a splash in the 1990s as well. I think he did something for the Bravura publisher.
Yeah. Weren't they linked to Malibu?
I think that's right. I think they were the imprint of Malibu. And I want to say he was working on Jim Starlin's Breed book.
Okay.
Was that right?
It sounds right. I'm looking it up.
Now, this is where my knowledge gets to be kind of fuzzy. Like, the 1990s forward is like, I can hang, but...
Yeah, especially with some of those small publishers, because they would start up and then disappear overnight.
Yeah.
Or they might have a wonky publishing schedule. You might go a couple months between issues, and it was always a challenge to keep up with some of those.
Yeah.
Malibu was like that early on. There was I remember reading this iBots book that was like, I think it was officially like Leonard Nimoy's iBots or something. And it had some George Perez art.
Oh,
and
cool.
I would find an issue like every 4 to 5 months, and I would gather it up because it's Perez art, you got to buy it.
Yeah.
But it was just so hard to track those issues down, just due to their publishing schedule or just availability of the book.
Well, yeah, and when a book doesn't come out for months at a time, it's kind of hard to keep an audience, and build that.
Yeah.
So, speaking of George Perez, we had a bit of a close call recently.
Yes, quite the scare the other week. He had to cancel a con appearance and went to the hospital with a apparent heart attack, but he appears to be back on the road to recovery.
Yeah, and we're grateful to have George still with us, and hope that he remains for years to come.
Absolutely. All right.
Yes.
Well, when we left off last episode, we found the Baxter building being hijacked into space by Dr. Doom and his would-be partner, the Submariner.
Yeah.
And again, this is the second time that Doom has attempted to kidnap the Baxter building by lifting it off the ground and into the air, heading into space at this point.
Right. This is much cooler than putting a net around it.
Yeah. And it's so funny because, we've talked about this before. Namor and Dr. Doom is such a great team up.
Yeah.
They've got common goals, but they don't always see eye to eye, and they end up bickering among themselves and fighting each other before fighting the Fantastic Four.
Yeah. And it's, I always compare them, or I like to compare and contrast them with the Luthor Brainiac team, who had underhanded schemes of their own, but they were relatively cordial between each other. They got along pretty great, even despite having their own plans. But yeah, Doom and Namor, they're just like these two egomaniacs who cannot keep it together very long. But it's
Yeah.
always an entertaining read.
Yeah. So, the team, Reed, makes his argument that, Namor probably has to start working with them, or he's going to face the same fate that they're going to face if they get up into space. So Namor starts working with them, and they keep Doctor Strange, or excuse Doctor Doom, hijacking the building, and eventually get him to return it back to Earth. Namor really acts like the hero throughout this story. And he's one of the characters that works as both the hero and the villain, even within the same story at times.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes Namor so eternally interesting. He's kind of unpredictable, and I do like how, like, this is the Fantastic Four's book, but they were toast, and their arch nemesis, or one of them, saves their lives.
Yeah.
Terrific.
All right.
How does he defeat Doom again?
I'm looking through here.
He confronts Doom in the where he's controlling the ship, and he uses a power that I always forget that he has. He channels electricity like an eel.
Yes.
And which is weird that Doctor Doom's suit isn't insulated against that.
You would think that a guy as smart as that would build that into the suit.
Yeah.
But,
Couple of things. This is only his Doctor Doom's second appearance.
Yeah.
So we're still ironing out the kinks with what he's going to be like. He also cracks a joke when he launches them into space, because he's sending them towards the sun, which he's sure will greet you warmly.
Yeah. And I believe this is just Namor's second Silver Age appearance as well.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And again, that Lee and Kirby were building a brand new universe at this point, and so many of these villains will appear multiple times early on, like Doom and Namor. And there were times when, especially, say a character like Namor, their powers or abilities would vary from issue to issue just because they didn't remember what they had introduced in the previous issue.
Well, and there's Golden Age stories where Namor shoots water out of his chest, which is crazy. Have you?
Yeah, and so Doom gets ejected from his rocket or jet. I mean, it looks more like a plane than a rocket, but
yeah.
And you see Doom attach himself to a meteor, and he goes flying off into space, and you think you're never going to see or hear from him again, but we know that's not true.
Yeah, but I love that he rides a comet to get away.
Yeah, I'm thinking your oxygen supply in that suit probably is not going to last very long.
Right. But I remember, if I recall, and I realize it won't happen in this issue, but he encounters a very naive but technologically advanced race of aliens, and he tricks them into helping him and stuff, and that's pretty fun.
Yeah. So the Baxter Building gets returned, lands safely back where it was at previously.
Yeah.
all the water and electrical connections are remade, and everything starts to return to normal.
Yeah, happens every day.
Comics, So at this point, we jump over, and we're going to make a new introduction.
Yes,
we meet Warren Worthington III.
Yeah.
Who is this son of a wealthy couple. He's kind of a kid of privilege.
Yes.
He's never had any once in life. Everything has always kind of been handed to him. He goes to the private prep schools, and he notices as he's becoming a teenager that his body is starting to change.
Yeah.
As bodies do when you're a teenager.
Right.
Only his is changing a little bit more than normal.
Yeah.
finds that he's developing wings.
Yeah.
And he is going to become the Angel, one of the original X-Men.
Yeah. Who, I think, a couple of things. One, I think, is really noticed that they point out that Warren excelled academically and in athletics. He was just great at everything, but all his classmates hated him for it,
Yeah.
And I thought that's just a neat piece of character development to give him. But
well, and that even carried over into the X-Men book.
yeah,
Times when Cyclops or Beast would resent Angel because everything came naturally to him. He had the money to charm Jean.
yeah,
He didn't suffer growing up like the others did. Whether it was because Scott was growing up in an orphanage or Hank looked like, a big beast, pardon the pun, but
yeah, yeah. And later on, I like him in the Silver Age, but I think as time goes by, the Angel becomes kind of one of my favorite X-Men, and not Archangel. I mean, I realize you got to do something with him, but I like him as the Angel, and
yeah.
I guess I have an aversion to brooding darkness in characters. I like the light.
Yeah, and especially once he left the X-Men, he kind of bounced around for a while.
He led the Champions.
They gave him some solo stories for a while. He was kind of like a backup supporting character in the Dazzler title for a while.
Oh.
And then eventually ended up with the Defenders. And
yeah. I remember him having a couple of backup stories in, I want to say, Amazing Adventures. They were written by Jerry Siegel. And those were the stories where his parents were killed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pretty interesting stuff. And then those stories aren't reprinted either.
I know. So many. As we record this, it's the day after Free Comic Book Day. So got to hang out in comic book stores all day long, which is a pretty awesome thing when you think about it.
Oh, yeah.
And I was flipping through the back issue selection at Clint's Comics, and I came across Amazing Adventures, where it was those Inhumans and Black Widow stories.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I think the Black Widow stories were reprinted at one point, but I don't know that those Inhuman stories have ever been reprinted.
They probably will now.
Yeah.
Now they're getting their own television show, but...
Exactly. But it amazes me that there's still these pockets of stories that have never been collected again in some form or fashion.
Yeah. I'd love for Kazar to get popular and have his 1970s material get reprinted, because that stuff's neat.
Yeah.
Because there's John Buscema and Barry Windsor Smith art on those, and it's neat stuff. George Tuska too, I want to say, but yeah.
All right, so we're going to make another cutaway here.
Yeah.
And we're going to revisit the American Southwest to check in on the Hulk.
Yeah.
Now, Thunderbolt Ross has become he's become obsessed with tracking down the Hulk. Like, the army doesn't have anything other to do than to find the Hulk.
Yeah.
And he realizes the key is to get Rick Jones, because then the Hulk will come running.
True.
Yeah. So we see where Rick goes back to the cave where the Hulk goes to hide or lock himself away. You got the big door, the pressure jam, and Hulk ends up breaking through.
Yeah.
It's still amazing how much Bruce Banner was able to do on his free time to prevent the Hulk from getting loose.
Yeah, find a secret, hollowed out cave and build a lab and prison for the Hulk. Yeah, no big deal. I can whip that up.
So we get into the first time that this it's done, but we'll see it happen many times over the years. They figure the way to get rid of the Hulk is to put him in a rocket and shoot him into space.
Yeah. I was gonna. My joke that I had written was well, good thing nobody tried that again. But yeah. They do, and surprise, he gets away after he hits the cosmic ray belt, and that triggers the Hulk transformation, and he busts out the ship and lands back on Earth.
Yeah.
So
Cosmic rays working in someone's favor there.
yeah, but then a weird thing happens because now back on Earth, some weird thing has happened, and so it's caused the Hulk and Rick's minds to be linked, and so the Hulk obeys Rick as long as Rick is awake.
Yeah. And the Hulk also finds now that he can transform during daylight hours. Again, early on it used to be tied to the moon, or he would transform at night.
Yeah. I think that was just the first 2 issues. This is issue 3 of The Incredible Hulk.
Yeah. But he can, that kind of opens up the stories that you can tell when you're not limited to just telling the stories at night.
Yeah. And a brighter color palette.
Yes.
Get
rid of the gray Hulk, go to the green Hulk.
Yeah.
Of course, we're reading these in the black and white edition, so
He can be any color you want.
So now we realize that maybe the cave wasn't going to work, so we're going to put a underground bunker under a lake to keep the Hulk contained.
Right. Oh.
But it's really the link between Rick Jones and the Hulk, and Rick is one of those characters that just gets recycled over and over across the Marvel universe in the 1960s. And he goes from the Hulk to being Captain America's sidekick.
Yeah, to Captain Marvel's sidekick.
Captain Marvel. And it's just, either right place, right time, or just incredibly bad luck.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Rick is one of the more fun supporting characters in the Marvel universe. He's certainly gotten more play than Snapper Carr.
Yeah. He keeps coming back. I mean, he's kind of like a go-to character. I know he was kind of central with Kurt Busiek's Avengers Forever story.
Yeah.
Peter David brought him back into the Hulk title there during his run. He's kind of like that everyman character that the writers like to go back to when they need like a common person to hang out with a superhero.
Well, Rick is fun. He has all the strengths of a teen sidekick or foil, and none of the lame stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, his manner of speech never kind of like fell out of favor, like the beatnik lingo that Snapper Carr would use, mm-hmm. Or and it's not the pun filled dialogue that Robin would have say.
Sure.
So he is definitely more straight, and Rick feels like a real guy. I think he's a relatable character, and I think there's plenty of reasons that writers want to keep using him.
Sure. All right, so now we get one of my favorite groups of villains because the entire concept is so crazy insane that it shouldn't work, but it does work.
Yep. And of course, we're talking about the Circus of
Master and his Circus of Crime.
Yeah. Oh, and it's so funny. Jeff and I covered covered a Golden Age story where Captain America fought the Ringmaster's father.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So the Ringmaster, the Circus of Crime is just what it is. It's a traveling circus, and all the key members of the circus also happen to be villains, criminals, super villains, because they all kind of have these powers and abilities that kind of put them up above the average man.
Not much, though.
yeah. Just slightly. Enough that you can, rob the audience of their money and jewelry or what have you.
Yeah.
But not enough that you can really stand up against a superhero at any point.
Yeah, I mean, they get it handed to them by the Hulk, by Thor, Spidey, Daredevil. Feels like the whole Marvel Universe has fought the Circus of Crime at one point.
Yeah. And the Ringmaster, he wears his big top hat, and it's got a little...
a hypnotic disc right in the front that spins around. It's so awesome.
Yeah. So he will hypnotize the audience. They'll rob him. But then you've got, is it the Gambino brothers that launch themselves from the cannon?
Yes.
And you've got this clown that he's the one that really has no powers.
Yeah.
I mean, he rides around on a unicycle. He looks really mean.
I remember there was like a snake charmer gal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a group of them.
Yeah.
And they were fun. Yeah, the Gambinos, yeah, they were acrobats, and then there was the human cannonball with the bullet-shaped helmet. I love that guy.
Yeah. So Rick Jones goes to the circus because he thinks it would be a nice diversion. He gets hypnotized along with the audience, and that kind of frees the Hulk out to go do his thing.
Yeah.
And he knows that Rick is in danger, so the Hulk shows up at the circus.
But then he joins the circus. How did the Circus of Crime subdue him? Is because they've got Rick under their control?
Well, I'm looking here. I thought he got hypnotized.
Yes, because Rick was in a trance and the Hulk is under Rick's control. Then it made the Ringmaster able to capture the Hulk.
Yeah.
So okay.
Yeah. And at one point, they even go so far as to dress the Hulk up in a clown costume.
Yeah, they don't show that panel here, but I wish they had. It's great.
Yeah. But at that point, Army has tracked them down. They show up at the circus. So the Hulk gets free. The audience gets free. Hulk takes Rick Jones. They get out of there. And of course, General Ross is vowing that he's going to track down the Hulk if he has to go to the ends of the earth to do so. It's kind of like Ahab and Moby Dick. I mean, he just kind of follows him around for the rest of his military career.
Yeah. That is funny.
So now it's time to check in on Thor.
In the golden halls of Asgard. Okay.
Yeah, we see the Rainbow Bridge leading to Asgard, and we're going to check in with Loki.
Yeah. Now, Loki's been imprisoned in a tree because of all his centuries of jackassery, and he cannot be freed unless his plight causes anyone to shed a tear. But because everybody hates him, how is that possible?
Yeah.
Well, over centuries, Loki has been able to gain control of the tree, somewhat. And here comes Heimdall just walking by, the guardian of the Bifrost.
Yeah, must have been his day off.
I guess so, yeah. Everybody's got to have a lunch break.
Sure.
So anyway, Loki causes a leaf to fall from the tree and poke him in the eye. And so it causes Heimdall's eye to tear, and so through a technicality, Loki's plight has caused someone to shed a tear, and then he is free. Which, even as a kid, I kind of thought that was crap, but
Loki is master of working the system to his benefit.
Yeah, but
and you'll see him do this later on in different issues. Where Odin will decree something, and he'll find a way to literally work his way out of it just based upon the words that Odin used.
It's very legalistic.
Yeah.
But yeah. So then we go back to the origins of Loki. He of course swears revenge on Thor and stuff. Duh. But we start with Loki. He is Odin was in fighting the Frost Giants or the Storm Giants?
I believe the Frost Giants.
I think that's right. And he slew Laufey, who was king of the Giants of Jotunheim, and then found Loki, who was newborn and very small, not like the giants. And so Thor, by the bristling beard of Odin, Odin declared that he would adopt Loki as his son and raise him beside Thor. And then we see, Thor and Loki in their boyhood together. And even then, Loki looks like a total creep.
And these are all these stories came from the Tales of Asgard backup feature that would run first in Journey into Mystery and then in the Thor title.
Yeah.
The main Thor stories would run about 15, 16 issues, and then the backup feature would run about 7 or 8 pages. And
Nice.
it was, and it's most times it was Kirby doing the entire issue. I mean, doing both stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, he was still doing a full 22, 23 pages of story each issue, but it was being broken up into 2 different stories. And that really expanded the whole Thor mythology more than just the ongoing Thor story.
I think that's such a winning formula because you have it in say, a relatively ongoing lead feature that may be a 1 or a 2-parter. But then you'll have these standalone stories that add just as backups that add so much backups information about Thor, and it's just makes you think he's so much cooler, and all the world that he comes from is so neat.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it's weird that Marvel didn't do that with any other title, really, because it was. I mean, at least that I can think of.
Nothing comes to mind. I mean,
Yeah, because it was such a winning thing, and I think it's what made Thor one of their more popular books. But yeah, Marvel was usually pretty eager to go back to, oh, this works, let's do more of this kind of thing. And they really didn't. I mean, yeah. Lost opportunity, I would say.
Yeah, it is odd. So we get our first true encounter of Loki versus Thor in comics. I mean, we get their back history, but Loki more than anyone has become Thor's main adversary over the years, and it makes for a very unique dynamic because they are stepbrothers. Not that everyone can relate to having a demigod as a stepbrother, but you can relate to having family fighting with family members.
Sure.
Trying to win your father's approval, however you can. So Loki has become a good adversary to Thor over the years.
Definitely.
So Loki's approach at this point is to replace Thor, create his own version of Thor, put him out there. But he finds that Loki himself cannot lift the hammer because he's not worthy.
Right.
And that when Donald Blake doesn't have the hammer, when Thor doesn't have the hammer, he reverts back to Donald Blake, and he's able to get out of Loki's trap, go retrieve the hammer, become Thor again, and take on his brother.
Yeah, I did think that was really funny because when Loki hypnotizes Thor and then says, give me the hammer, and even though he's under an enchantment, the enchantment placed on Mjolnir is stronger. And he says, I can't give it to you. It can never be wrested from Thor. And so that he dreams up that duplicate of Thor, and Thor hands it right over. Very clever.
Yeah. All right. So now we're going to jump back to...
the Angel.
The Angel, who has now sprouted a full set of wings.
Yeah.
And this is the worst thing that could ever happen to him because he doesn't know how he's going to be able to live his life with a pair of bird wings coming out of his back.
Right.
But he realizes that the wings are strong enough that he can actually fly and control the wings. And, of course, it so happens the prep school that he's at, a fire starts up. And so the Angel goes around. He dons a blonde wig and a nightshirt. Now, he's always been blonde to begin with.
Right.
So why add a blonde wig? But it's longer hair, different hairstyle.
Sure.
Puts on a robe, so he looks like a true angel from heaven, flying around. And he rescues all the boys at the prep school, the same boys that were mocking or resentful of Warren
Yeah.
pages earlier, but the Angel rescues everyone, and he kind of realizes that he can do something with these wings that he's being given, and he's soon recruited by Xavier to join the school and become a member of the X-Men.
Yeah. So then we cut back to Dr. Henry Pym, Ant-Man.
All right.
And he fights some commies.
As is a popular foe in the 1960s.
Yeah. I love it. The commie he fights is called Comrade X.
Yes.
And he looks like a Cossack with this big mustache and stuff. But I think this is a story where Ant-Man learns that when he's shrunk down, he retains his full strength from normal size. So he's able to, like, trip him and beat him up and stuff as a teeny tiny guy.
And I wonder how much of that is carrying over from what DC was doing with the Atom, because the Atom could control his weight and his strength when he was smaller size.
Yeah, or I'm sure they're like, well, that works, and we should do that too. But sure. I mean, if you were a shrinking hero and then you didn't, and you were just had your relative strength, not the same strength you had you're in a big, you'd be like, okay, I'm gonna step on you and we're done. And that's the end of Ant-Man. I feel like Doll Man had regular strength too.
I think so.
Yeah. So I guess for those kinds of heroes to work, you have to at least have regular strength. But
all right, so now we're going to jump back over to the Fantastic Four.
Yeah. And a story that is so borrows heavily from several science fiction movies of the 1950s, and we've got The Day the Earth Stood Still, This Island Earth, and The Man from Planet X, and I like all of those things really tie into this story.
Yeah, and this should be Fantastic Four number 6 at this point.
Yeah.
Fantastic Four was a bi-monthly book. It became monthly book with these.
Sorry, Jerry. Number 6 was the one with Namor and Doctor Doom.
Okay.
So this is, I think, number 7.
All right. So it's Fantastic Four has been around for a year now.
Yeah.
With being on a bi-monthly schedule, but it's still early enough that they're still doing basically monster books.
Oh yeah.
The stuff with the Angel actually appeared much later chronologically, but
from a publishing standpoint, yes.
It fits into this point. So, whether it's the stuff with Thor, dealing with gods and giants and Asgard and all that, Ant-Man is basically, scientists getting shrunk down and fighting small monsters like the ants or whatever.
Yeah.
Fantastic Four fighting aliens. I mean, these really still aren't superhero comics, even though they may be wearing costumes.
Yeah, I mean, I think issues 5 and 6 were like, oh, we're fighting supervillains, but that was like the first non-monstery or heavily science fiction influenced story that they did. Yeah. And then they immediately go back to this.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, they meet this jerk-off Kurgo, who's the dictator of the planet Xanth.
And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't Xanth later used with the Nova title?
Maybe. I haven't read, you mean the 70s Nova book?
Yeah.
I've only read a couple issues of that book, Jerry, so I couldn't say.
Not a problem. All right, so the Fantastic Four get taken to Xanth, and they're just trying to. I literally do not even remember this issue.
Well, then here, let me jump in. I don't remember why they get brought there. Oh, the planet is doomed. Like a comet is gonna crush them, but they only because Kurg is like kind of a control freak. There's only a couple of spaceships because he doesn't want people to, be independent from him, and so the 5 billion people on his world can't escape in these 2 ships.
Yeah.
I mean, Reed borrows the concept of the shrinking from Ant-Man, and he says, okay, well, why don't we shrink everybody, and then you can all fit in those 2 ships, and your whole population can be saved. Well, Kurgo doesn't want to give the antidote to everyone, and so he's ends up getting something happens, and he ends up getting left behind while everyone escapes, and he's left there doomed to die, which he deserves.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of it. And the Fantastic Four go home.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting there, I mean, this is the first time where we get events or characters tying in from the other books. When we start making reference to Ant-Man.
Yeah.
That he shared his formula. All right, now we realize that those characters inhabit the same universe.
Right, and that's loads of fun.
Yeah. Because even at that time, the DC universe was really just kind of starting to form because, you had crossovers in the 1940s, but then throughout the 1950s, outside of Batman and Superman, there wasn't really much crossover between the characters.
Very true.
They all kind of ran in their own little silos, and a lot of that was based upon the editors of those books that, the Superman editor wanted nothing to do with anyone else. We don't need any of those other characters. We have enough characters here. And
yeah.
The Batman editor was kind of the same way. It's like, we can do our own stories. We don't need other characters. And so having them all kind of come together in the Justice League kind of changed that around, brought them together. And I think that's, Fantastic Four was Marvel's response to the Justice League.
Yeah.
And this is the first steps to really build a universe where the titles are going to interlink together, and you're going to have that chance where if you're in a Spider-Man comic, you might see Thor flying by in the background or something like that.
Yeah. And yeah, I think I loved how the Marvel and DC fed off each other at this time, as far as ideas go, because then we got all those great Flash and Green Lantern team-ups, the improbable Hawkman and Atom teaming.
Yeah.
And even in just the Mort Weisinger books, he'd have Green Arrow and Aquaman show up every once in a while. So yeah, it's fun.
All right. So after the Fantastic Four return to Earth, we see Johnny Storm getting his own solo adventures, which these were a feature within the Strange Tales comic.
Oh man, and those are some of the most abysmal comic stories.
Yeah. When I was writing up the review for the Essential Human Torch, I mean, I realized my opinion was it should have probably just been included in the Essential Fantastic Four line and not give him his own volume like that.
Yeah.
Just because so many of these Human Torch stories, you get all 4 members of the Fantastic Four making appearances.
Yeah.
Sometimes Sue would go on adventures with Johnny, or the Thing would go on adventures with Johnny. And it's very rarely just a Human Torch only story.
Yeah. Yeah. And really very few of those stories are like stand out or any good at all.
They're pretty subpar. The one thing that merits attention is how many of the villains were introduced within those stories.
It did introduce the Wizard and Paste Pot Pete, who then formed the Frightful Four, and for that I'm like, okay, and it was nice because it kind of introduced and worked out what wasn't so great about those guys and made them more interesting, made them look cooler.
Yeah.
Before the Frightful Four got introduced.
Yeah. All right. So we see Human Torch fighting this very nondescript villain called the Destroyer.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a generic name for a generic character, and that name will get recycled over the years.
Yeah. Well, and it was recycled even then. I mean, the Destroyer was a Golden Age Marvel hero who got brought back during the Invaders book in the 70s.
Yeah. All right. So as we turn the page here in our essential collection here, we get introduced to the Wizard, who he as that character is developed, he really wants to be comparable to Reed Richards in terms of his abilities, his scientific skills. He's making all these inventions to give himself what appears to be powers and such, but he's really just a subpar version of Reed. He's never the equal of Reed, and he never quite gets it.
Yeah. And he looks like John Carradine with a beard, just really long-faced, and with this strange goatee. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Wizard is making plans to, take over the world, and to do that, it means defeating the Human Torch. Because the Human Torch must be the most powerful member of it.
Like he's already like a titan of industry, and like he's famous for all his great inventions. And he's like, oh, that'll put me on top, defeating the Human Torch.
Yeah.
It's kind of incongruous, like his level of ambition in one area and then not so much in another.
Yeah.
But
he kind of looks and reminds me of DC's Dr. Light.
Oh, he is so Dr. Light.
Dr. Light started out with these great ambitions, and first he was going to defeat the Justice League, and when that didn't work, all right, we'll defeat the Teen Titans, and then when that didn't work, we'll go after the Atom, the smallest superhero possible, and once I defeat him, then I'll be on my road to conquer the world.
Yeah. Never quite happened.
Now, we get this one scene here in this story, and it gets used over and over, where the way to stop the Human Torch is to put him in asbestos. In this case, an asbestos suit.
Right.
And so we see this thing where he's wearing this suit, but his head is still in flames.
Right.
All right. Apparently, we don't know quite how asbestos works.
Right.
Because you would think that wearing a suit, it might really control the flame all the way around. But just the wanton use of asbestos throughout the Marvel Universe in the 1960s, you would think that they would all have lung cancer by now.
Oh, yeah, at least Johnny.
Yeah.
It's like the de facto thing people use against him. And good. Because if Johnny died of cancer, I would love that. And then, well, we got to have a Human Torch. They'll bring in the android Human Torch, who I love. He's actually an interesting character. I think he's cool. But yeah. But anyway, so the Wizard dreams up this suit that will mimic the Torch's power, and so he starts robbing banks, and people think the Human Torch has turned criminal.
Yeah.
Where have we seen this
It works
before?
so well for the Skrulls.
Yeah, right.
Impersonate the heroes, make them look bad.
Yeah, okay.
So Johnny stops the Wizard, and the Wizard is going to come back multiple times over the years as leader of the Frightful Four, with the aforementioned Paste Pot Pete, who would become the Trapster.
Yeah.
Spider-Man's foe, the Sandman, would become a regular member. And then that fourth spot would rotate quite a bit over the years.
Yeah.
For a while it was Medusa, before we realized that Medusa was a member of the Inhumans and all of that. But it's always those three plus a fourth one, whoever we can get to fill in for this particular issue or story arc.
I seem to remember at least one time they had Electro.
Yes.
Yeah. And I can get down with that.
Yeah. There was one time where, and it came in the late 70s, like before issue 200, where the Frightful Four take over the Baxter Building, and they start holding auditions for the fourth member.
Yeah, and the Texas...
all these would-be villains to the building to try out.
Yeah, the Texas Twister tries out. I think they pick him at least for a while. And Captain Ultra, who, you know, his only weakness is fire. He's like totally afraid of fire, which makes him useless against the Human Torch. But also, Captain Ultra, despite being an idiot, was a good guy.
Yeah. And I think they ended up going with Thundra.
Oh, that's right.
She was going to be fighting the Fantastic Four, and she had amorous affections for the Ben Grimm. So. Yeah,
who didn't reciprocate, and that made it funny.
Yeah.
But then, of course, she reformed, and then she was another one of the hangers-on at the Baxter Building. I think that was also the time that the Impossible Man came and wasn't like being a problem. He was just hanging out.
Yeah, just hanging out. His planet had been destroyed, and he came and realized that he could just sit around all day and watch TV.
Well, there you go.
All right. Well, we're getting to the end of this issue, but before we leave this issue, we're going to get introduced to one more member of the future X-Men here. We meet a young Bobby Drake.
Yeah.
And he's out on a date and gets attacked by some roughnecks from school. Some maybe they're jocks or just lunkheads, but they're trying to stomp on Bobby and take his girl away, and Bobby reacts and triggers his mutant abilities, and he freezes one of the guys.
Yeah, and the implication seems the guys definitely had pretty slimy intentions with the girl, I wanted to make a joke about like her being a beard, but I can't articulate it right now. But yeah.
So that's where this issue ends.
Yeah.
Bobby freezing the guy. On the page here, we're teased for next month's issue with the conclusion of Iceman's origin, with visits by Cyclops and Professor X. We're going to get the origin of Iron Man, origins of Odin and Asgard, first appearance of Alicia Masters and her stepfather, the Puppet Master.
Oh, good.
And then Surtur, the Ant-Man, the Tomorrow Man, and much more.
Sounds like it's going to be really Thor heavy.
Yeah.
Which is all right.
The next couple of issues are really, really definitely Asgard, Thor intense. And what I've found, reading these over the course of a week or two, they revisit a lot of the same panels from one issue to the next when they're doing the Odin stuff.
Oh.
So.
Okay.
Point those out. But
thanks for the warning. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to next time. This will be a lot of fun.
Yep. And again, all of these stories, well, most of the stories, I mean, we pointed out that some of them haven't been reprinted, but most of these you can find Marvel's Essentials, Masterworks, Omnibus, Epics. So much of this is available. It might even be available online through the Marvel Unlimited plan.
It may be.
Read a lot through the digital. So definitely go out, seek out these issues, give them a look, because a lot of these still do hold up, and the ones that don't hold up are still entertaining. Yeah.
If they don't hold up, they're often so crazy. You will definitely be smiling. The Marvel Saga is a co-production of the Worst Comic Podcast Ever and Comic Reflections. You can find this show on both of our feeds, but I hope you listeners would subscribe to both.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Until next time, Excelsior!
Stand a little straighter, walk a little prouder, be an innovator, laugh a little louder, go forever greater, we can show you how to, and when will you be then? You'll belong, you'll belong. you belong to the Merry Marvel Marching Society. March along, march along, march along to the song of the Merry Marvel Marching Society. If you growl, if you groan, with the dour, sour outlook, if you howl, if you moan, you can lose your sour throat from keeping trim and in step with the vim and outstep of the Merry Marvel Marching Society.
Be an early riser,
Strive to be ambitious,
speak a little wiser,
try to be judicious,
be a good advisor,
never ever vicious.
and when
Will you be then?
Face front! Lift your head! You're on the winning team!
You belong to the Merry Marvel Marching Society. March along, march along, march along to the song of the Merry Marvel Marching Society. If you growl, if you groan, and your score is merely zero, do not howl, do not moan. You can be a superhero marching right along to the fighting song of the Merry Marvel Marching Society. Stand a little straighter, walk a little prouder, be an innovator, laugh a little louder, grow forever greater. We can show you how to.